We begin this morning with a warning from President Muhammadu Buhari to those promoting insurrection and burning down critical national assets. The president said they should expect a rude shock. Speaking at a meeting with the chairman of Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmood Yakub, President Buhari says his government will not condone the attacks on the facilities of the electoral body. He warns on the dangers posed to future elections by the burning of INEC facilities. Since the last election, INEC has reported 42 cases of attacks on INEC offices nationwide.
It is very clear that they intend to make sure that this administration fails. I'm getting good intelligence report on daily basis. The question of insecurity in the country is being mentioned all over the world, not only here in Nigeria. But I believe there are Nigerians that will attempt at least to be fair by what I believed, that I will run the country according to the Constitution. Now, with all these people who want power, whoever they are, have they proved that I was not following the Constitution? Well, am I not leading the country according to the Constitution? What do they want? I had one impression which gave me a lot of hope and confidence to continue the way I wanted. So whoever wanted diversion or destruction of the system at this point, I think will soon have their shock of their lives.
All right, Tony, your views on this?
Rude shocks await. Well, we certainly hope so, because the consistent attacks, deliberate attacks on INEC offices and infrastructure like their vehicles, generators, and what have you, cannot be tolerated. Those are attacks on our democracy. And frankly, this kind of rhetoric is in order, but I do hope that it's backed by action. Because the president did tell us, he assured us that whoever is found sort of ambling around the forest armed will be shot on sight. I have not heard of a single casualty of that order. So, and I also want the president to ensure that he backs this sort of pro-democracy rhetoric with the action that is immediate and within his powers, such as immediately attending or demanding that the National Assembly immediately attend to the Electoral Amendment Act as a matter of urgency, and also the unfortunate incidents that we had recently with the presidential nomination of some people that were felt to be unsuitable for jobs at INEC because of their partisan tendencies. Also, do not make these words, these really pro-democratic stance from the president, kind of hollow. There's a lot that is low-hanging fruit that he has yet to attend to. So I would think that that's also an emergency that should be looked into. But yes, action has to be taken. We cannot continue like this as a nation. The lunatics have taken over the asylum, quite frankly. And it's the same thing, no matter how agitated. We had former governor of Enugu State recently, Chimaroke Namani, asking those who are disgruntled in any way to come forward with their grievances. That's his attempt to sort of calm the waters, to try and douse the tension that's causing these attacks on INEC's infrastructure. Yes, they should come forward, but they should also be arrested. Arson is a crime in Nigeria, cannot be tolerated. These are criminals and they should be dealt with accordingly.
Great point, too, Dr. Sabati.
Well, this has been one of the most controversial statements ever made by President Muhammadu Buhari. And I think it's noteworthy that he wasn't reading a script. He was speaking from the heart. And after that message went out, after his meeting with the leadership of the Independent National Electoral Commission, led by Professor Mahmood Yakub, that team went there to give him a report. And the key report is that in 14 states of the Federation, 42 facilities belonging to the Independent National Electoral Commission have been attacked. Either they've been burned down or the equipment in those places have been destroyed. And the most notorious parts of the country will be the southeastern part, in Ebonyi, in Enugu, in Anambra. You have had, facilities of the INEC being attacked. Now, the key message that the INEC took to the president is that this could create a constitutional crisis in 2023 and compromise the efforts to conduct the general elections for 2023. One, with regard to the safety security movement deployment of hard work officials that INEC relies on, and even the ability, the capacity to conduct the election itself. And this was what the president was referring to. But the statements he made have been very controversial. One, he says he defends the rule of law and that he has sworn an oath to defend the Constitution of Nigeria and that he is committed fully to that. Well, the president saying that he will defend the Constitution of Nigeria is not a problem. That's what he's sworn to an oath to defend. But the question that has come out is the effort by many Nigerians, including the PDP, to deconstruct what the president said. The president said, for example, that in certain parts of the country, it was specific, certain parts of the country, he didn't mention the southeast. The people have reduced that certain parts of the country to mean the southeast. Because he went on in the next sentence to talk about how he fought the civil war for 30 months. And that many of these people who are causing problems in certain parts of the country were not part of the civil war. They don't know what it was. And that they will be taught the language that they will understand. That has been interpreted to mean that the president was more or less declaring war on the Southeast. And this was coming on a day when the Southeast was on a shutdown, declared by the separatist group known as the Independent People's Organization of Biafra. So people have said, oh, so the president wants to clamp down on the Southeast. What has he done if he really wants to enforce the Constitution? What has he done if he wants to teach people in the language that they will understand? What has he done if he wants to shock people who are fighting Nigeria with regard to Boko Haram, with regard to the herdsmen problem? So I think that the presidency may need to offer some clarification in this regard. It was the president just speaking to the Nigerian people, but perhaps he may have been misinterpreted. Perhaps he may have spoken a bit too honestly. I think a follow-up statement may well be required to show that the president is not threatening any part of the country and that defending the Constitution, as he expressly stated, will include defending the interest of every Nigerian, whether they are asking for separation or they are, questioning the Nigerian state or attacking infrastructure. But I like the point he made about the election 2023. He says the government has no plan for a third term and the government has no plan to violate the Constitution. I think that that's the bigger point that he made that people should take away.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abatian Tundu. That's all on news headlines. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Rotus, Michael Adesua, Aaron Akiri to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19 and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. And we're going straight to our dependable Rotus Adiri. Rotus, how's it going, my friend? Hi, Rotus.
Going well, Rufai. Good morning to you. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Tundu. The African Business Update, of course, kicks off with the big news from the OPEC Plus ministerial meeting yesterday, where they decided to gradually reduce output curbs starting in July, according to a press statement that they put out. What that means for Nigeria is that our output for July is pegged at 1.5 million barrels per day. Now, yesterday, right before the African Business Update segment was over, Doctor asked a question about why Nigeria's revenues haven't been rising as oil prices have been increasing. I was a little too quick in responding yesterday and saying that, well, it's because of cost of subsidy under recovery that's eating into our margins. That's not the case. Let's take a look at this OPEC table. You should have in front of you an OPEC table showing production. This is from their April reports. They put out a monthly report on the OPEC website where they look at, among a number of other things, the volume voluminous report, but this particular section looks at outputs for a number of countries. Nigeria is at the bottom of your screen, and you'll see there that highlighted in yellow for 2019, Nigeria's production was 1.7 million barrels per day. Then COVID hit, and then OPEC had to put in output curbs, and you can see it fall to 1.4 million barrels per day in 2020. And of course, there's some quarterly numbers there as well. Essentially, the OPEC curbs and Nigeria having to comply with those curbs in order to reduce supply, in order to support prices, is the reason why we haven't seen Nigeria's revenues rise in coordination with rising oil prices. Now, of course, if we take a look at the next table, we should look at Nigeria's historical production. This is going back to 2016. We haven't actually peaked past 2 million barrels per day. Now, of course, that's one is the OPEC curbs. If you look at the very last quarter of your screen to your right, and also production issues, at various output points for Nigeria. But essentially, between the OPEC curbs, between production issues, those are the reasons why you haven't seen revenues rise. However, Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele should be smiling now at what he's seeing with oil crossing $70 per barrel, because this, of course, means more revenue for Nigeria with respect to what's going to be coming in. So again, OPEC is, of course, optimistic, slightly bullish with regards to long-term demand. But again, if you go back to the first table, the OPEC table, you'll notice that I circled Iran. Iran was circled in red. If you look at that row on the OPEC table, that first table, you'll see that there's nothing there. Iran is blank. So one of the headwinds that they're looking at as far as supply is concerned is that if Iran's nuclear deal, if the Biden administration, they come out and agree on bringing Iran back to the table, Iran's supply is going to add to general supply of oil, and that could depress prices. Also, they're a little worried about what's happening, not a little, sorry, they're a lot worried about what's happening in India, Japan, Brazil with these COVID flare-ups there. So those are the headwinds to demand, but generally they've agreed to gradually restore reduce those output curves. It's good for Nigeria, 1.5 million barrels per day for July, and that should see us enjoy gradually, at least marginally, what we're seeing with oil prices. Again, but still, on the other side, there is what it's going to mean for the landing cost of fuel on the other side, and what it means for the fiscal side of things for Nigeria. From there, we move to Heirs Holdings. So we covered this live event yesterday exclusively. Tony Elumelu's Heirs Holdings. Of course, he was on the morning show with you all barely 2-3 weeks ago, where he talked about a number of issues in the Nigerian economy. Babajide Sanwo-Olu was there. Heirs Holdings essentially launched two new companies, an insurance company and a life assurance company. Also commissioned their new building, Heirs Tower, which was commissioned by Babajide Sanwo-Olu, and also chair of Heirs Holdings, Tony Elumelu. Insurance penetration, Adefemi Akinsanya was live there. I spoke with her at the Global Business Report. We crossed to her live at the event. She talked about the low level of insurance penetration in Nigeria. It's in the single digits. Tony Elumelu as well talked about it. So in their capacity at Heirs Holdings, they're doing what they can to try to push this forward. They also, one of the, I think the MD of Heirs Life Assurance spoke to Adefemi at the event, and he talked about the digital side of things and how they want to put insurance in the palm of Nigerians, so to make it, easily accessible, and a number of other things. So look, there's, we talked about the 2 days prior to that, the fire at Ladipo and the spare parts vehicle hub, and how a number of those businesses were hurt with respect to the fire that destroyed them. Fires breaking out everywhere. You need micro insurance to penetrate these areas. Balogun Market, Tedo Show, around, so on and so forth. So there's that matter as well. And then finally, Godwin Emefiele was talking about the cotton, textile, and garment industry. He was at he was represented by Deputy Governor of the CBN with respect to one of the companies with respect to being able to disburse 44 billion naira over the last 2 years, and how critical CTG, that's cotton, textile, garment, is relevant to the Nigerian economy, and how they've created, I think, about 620,000 jobs between 2019 and 2020 based on the disbursement. So textile, of course, they need power. You need power in order to revive the textile industry. The CBN is doing as much as it can, but there's got to be more support on the fiscal side. I mean,
Ruth, I'm excited that we're talking about textile, because it used to be a very big hub in terms of manufacturing in the 70s and the 80s. It was when we had the currency issues in, I think, 86. that was when Texas started going down because people couldn't meet up their demands. I mean, I keep talking about the good old days of SOCAS and the lace factories out of, the Jebu area of Ogun State and across the country, Kaduna, Bompai, Kano, and other areas like that. And it was a major employer of labor. I mean, take for instance, SOCAS. Just one lace factory out of Ogun State was employing about 5,000 people on their payroll. Just Just one lace factory was employing about 5,000 people on their payroll as at its height. And tell you what, Rotus today, once that job did go, once the lace factory did crumble, all those 5,000 jobs nowhere to be found. Real quickly, let me move on to another one. Insurance is key, but the regulators should come in big. Rotus, in Ghana, for every building you go, every business building, you must see the insurance package of that building pasted in front of the building. You get penalized for it if you don't see it there. That's to show you how they take insurance seriously. There are many buildings in this country that are not even insured in the first place. Many public buildings that are not insured. So if there were to be banks like this, banks in Ghana, you should see, the insurance package of the building. Quickly, let me move to oil and gas real quickly. It just shows that Nigeria is not really an oil-producing nation. We're just joking. We keep deluding ourselves. It's a people nation because the money people bring into the economy in foreign remittance is way more than oil. Look at Kuwait on that chart, doing over 2 million barrels. Look at the population of Kuwait, less than 10 million.
No, Rufai, remittances is second to oil.
But look at the population of Kuwait. Look at the population of Kuwait. Look at how many barrels they're churning out per day. And look at Nigeria, 200 million population. What we depend on this is oil. And see, we're churning out less than, about 1-point-something million barrels per day.
Well, the production output for OPEC Plus and its members is regulated. And the big issue in the meeting that was held this week is about how to rebalance under an agreement, a declaration of cooperation by the members, how that can be addressed as it appears that there is increased demand. Now, the Sheikh, of Saudi Arabia made a point at the meeting, which was a basis for great optimism, about the fact that with increased demand in China and the United States, then, of course, it will be easier for OPEC Plus to continue with its adjustment of the production supply cuts. Hence, in June, we are expecting, an additional supply of about 700,000 barrels per day, and in August, 841,000 barrels per day. Now, what this means is that for a country like Nigeria, let's come to Nigeria that you talk about. Now, the peg for Nigeria, the limit is actually about 1.8 million barrels per day. It's 1.8, but expected production output, in July, it's about 1.5 million barrels per day. Now, in terms of capacity. Now, what that means is that Nigeria is going to get more revenue. The CBN will be able to have more inflow of forex, crude oil, inputs accounting for about 90% of forex earnings. And then, of course, maybe that will put the CBN in a better position to manage foreign reserves and all of that. So in terms of revenue, we will have more money. But what does it translate into for the ordinary man? If crude oil is selling at above $70 per barrel, and it could even go higher if the nuclear deal with Iran is resolved, so the production output, can continue to go up. So Nigeria will make more money. But what we've been told, if market forces determine the pump price of fuel, it means that the pump price of fuel will pari passu go up. So what is the implication of that? What is Nigeria going to do? If pump price of fuel is 162 naira per liter now, will Nigeria have to increase subsidy? If we increase subsidy, where is the gain for us? These were some of the questions, I wanted you to help address yesterday, because the fact that the pump price is going up internationally may not necessarily translate into an advantage for the ordinary man, who is going to buy at the fuel stations. As for health holdings, yes, congratulations to health holdings. They're expanding, right? Now, the Tony Elumelu conglomerate is now into insurance. That's in a service and expression of confidence in the potential of the Nigerian economy. Is confidence at a time of uncertainty, and that, I think, should be a source of encouragement for other investors. Besides, I like the point that Tony Elumelu made about democratizing prosperity. I like that phrase. You know, he says he wants to create jobs, he wants to create wealth, because these additional companies would offer jobs to people and build confidence and maybe perhaps inspire other investors. But I think the point about the regulator is very important. But my point about the regulator is this. The there isn't enough in terms of insurance education or intelligence in this country. Nigerians believe more in God. God will take care of everything. And that's why when there is any tragedy, they just say, well, that's what God wants. So maybe that's the angle in which the regulator can come in.
Well, everybody should have learned by now from the post-EndSARS mayhem and then the pandemic that you actually do need insurance. But regarding mandatory insurance in Nigeria, even with our cars that it's supposed to be mandatory, the stats are actually quite low. There is low uptake, so something needs to be done about that. But I wanted to talk about CBN's intervention, the CTG issue that you raised, which is great because it makes sense. Nigeria, we have 26 states out of 36, obviously, producing cotton. But I do worry about us just failing to exploit low-hanging fruit. President Buhari's Order 3 of 2017, which I thought was great, about supporting local content. What's the uptake on that? A lot of our MDs still order their uniforms from abroad. School uniforms are ordered from abroad. We don't have value-added products. If we're even thinking of exports with regards to cotton, raw cotton is not where it's at. Value-added products, what about that? That should be looked into as well so that we get a real handle on the entire value chain. Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, great point, Tuna, Dr. Abatia. Rotus, I'd like to say big thank you to you for your time.
Exactly.
We'll quickly move on to...
The point was made at that meetup as well.
Okay, Rotus, I mean, great insight as always. We'll quickly jump to Michael Wilson. Michael, good morning. How are you doing?
Morning, fine, thank you. Many Americans got their first taste of normalcy actually over the weekend, and it's being showed basically in what's happened as far as stock trading is concerned. Reflation trade is what they're calling it. So they're talking about hotels, cruise ships, surprise airlines, and so on. No big surprise there. And as you've already noted, that OPEC, it was a mild meeting. I mean, I have to say, on one side reported in the past on, you could cut the atmosphere with a knife, but not this time around. Nothing out of Iran, no signs of a breakthrough there. So therefore, we'll come on to that later, but you have discussed it in quite fully, but I'll just give you the overall view from the market's point of view. Asia Pacific shares very mixed, really. Official data showing higher than expected growth in Australia. So that was quite high. Nikkei 225 in Japan gained a little, not much movement basically as far as equity markets are concerned. We'll wait to the United States to adjust and see where the markets are actually going towards the end of the week. But the jobs figures is the big one. China is handing out $6.2 million in digital currency to Beijing residents as part of a trial. It's a sort of lottery. They're getting 200 renminbi or yuan each, and it still has to do a digital rollout nationally of the digital yuan, which has been developing since 2014. But these trials are felt to see how people will actually work it. China hit like everywhere else as far as the chip shortage is concerned. Its electric car company NIO saw deliveries slide in May. Global automotive companies are complaining about this semiconductor shortage. XPeng said it delivered 5,686 cars in May. So 483% year increase. So some doing slightly better than others. Chip giants, therefore, unsurprisingly, are making more money than ever. They saw their revenues in the first quarter of 2021 surge to a record high $22.75 billion, actually, if you want the figures. And of course, chips are the lifeblood, really, aren't they, of the world economy? But they're also in short supply, as you know. Shortage could now last, people are saying, until 2023. Inflation pressures building as well in that particular region. South Korea's consumer inflation accelerated to a 9-year high in May. Consumer prices rose 2.6 in May. A year ago it was in deflation. Now, of course, it isn't, as the coronavirus pandemic struck demand and supply chains then. Now things are getting slightly better. China's Vice President Liu and US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen had a phone call yesterday talking about the country's economic relationship between the two of them. Yellen discussed Biden's plans to support a strong economic recovery, and they were talking about, and this is typical Treasury speak, you like this, it says support a continued strong economic recovery and the importance of cooperating on areas that are in US interests. Yeah, so is that cooperation? I don't think it is, but anyway, there we go. Neither side shared any further details that particular conversation. So US recap then yesterday. So back from holiday, and we saw some big PPI numbers coming out. 3 big manufacturing supports: ISM, Chicago, and Dallas. Dallas, obviously Texas slowed down. Chicago doing quite well, but that's a lot to do with the bump up in Boeing orders, we feel, actually. As far as Texas is concerned, that's slightly better. Goods price index remained near its all-time high. Wages and benefits index pushed up to a new high of 39. So in an area like Texas, which, as you know, is very highly oil dependent to the rest of it, but there are other industries there. United States gradually creeping back, but again, the all-important one, the jobs figures on Friday. You covered OPEC Plus. I don't think you need me to say too much more about that, basically. I mean, no news out of Iran, relatively friendly atmosphere. Bush to push to keep production up, shut out American shale if possible, agreed to stay on course with their gradual plan of raising oil production in July, given the robust kind of demand that people are expecting quite now. That will probably continue, but I would caution we still need a result out of the Iran talks. Brent paired a few gains and so on, but Brent crude prices are edging towards this sort of $70 a barrel, which as oil revenue countries will actually quite like that keeps going. But keep your hats on until July, I would. The world's largest meat supplier is called JBS. They're based in Sao Paulo, but their Canadian and US systems have been hit by ransomware hijacking, and so now whether they're going to pay money, they feel as though it's come from Russia. That's according to the White House, but then again, you would expect the White House to say that. Could lead to a shortage of meat, therefore increase in prices. Will the companies pay? Probably will. Keeping the inflation picture going, EU inflation rose to about 2%. That's just about the top range of the central bank's target. It comes as COVID restrictions gradually get scaled back, boosting economic activity, but those countries have got a long way to go. Meanwhile, the EU's sealed a deal on taxes and also profits, which is going towards this multinational way of trying to balance or keep the playing field level. And in addition to that, G7 will be talking about that, expected to come to a deal later in the week. UK retail prices up. Consumers could face far more shopping bills and the rest of it coming up. Markets relatively hot as a result of that. Recovery from the pandemic rising much more quickly than expected in the UK. And finally, on commodities, I'd point you once again, let's not worry about oil and gold too much like we normally do. What about copper? Is copper replacing gold perhaps as a safe haven to go to? The good thing about copper is, apart from being essential for all industrial output as we are now, and the fact it's actually surging to all-time highs, is it's actually, there's 2 types of inflation. There's good inflation and bad inflation. Good inflation is when demand pulls it, and that's what copper is actually quite a good hedge for. I leave that thought open to you. That's what the markets are talking about this morning. That's your global view.
Real quickly, Michael, number 1 will be about inflation in the Eurozone. Finally, the chickens have come home to roost. What's your take on that? Yesterday was Germany, today France and some other countries. Secondly, pre-pandemic levels growth coming back to Brazil and some other country, lessons to learn.
Okay. Inflation in the EU, well, the ECB, of course, has different ideas about how it should actually handle that. Should they actually worry about an undershoot? Should they worry about an overshoot of inflation? Have they run out of ammunition? These are the kind of questions that are surging around this. We won't hear a great deal about this until their next meeting. So, it's something that central banks have to handle. No bad thing. As I said, there is good inflation and there's bad inflation. If we're talking about demand picking up, then that's got to be good for EU countries. But, of course, there's EU countries and there are EU countries. Those around the outside, the weaker ones, will be looking at the European Central Bank, wondering when they're going to cut off the money. The stronger ones, like Europe, like Germany, for example, and France, will be thinking, well, we're facing inflation. What is the European Central Bank going to do? Those answers are fairly foggy. That's because the ECB is a fairly foggy organisation. As far as pre-pandemic stuff is concerned, it's certainly heating up here. I think that the rest of the world has got quite a way to go, but certainly in relatively small economies like the UK, it's getting quite hot fairly quickly. Again, inflation, interest rates, central bankers are going to have to earn their salaries and start coming up with some decent answers.
Right. Do you have a question for Mr. Wilson?
Please go ahead. After you.
Okay, I wanted to talk about the sort of dispute that's brewing between UK farmers against the UK-Australia trade deal, and UK farmers feeling that it's no longer going to be a level playing field because Australia is allowed to use pesticides and additives that are banned in the UK, so prices will be lower and they're going to end up with the short end of the stick. What are your thoughts on trade deals? Should they be scrutinized by an independent body? If so, by whom? How to ensure the interests of the UK farmers in all of this?
Right, so two different things. First of all, as a consumer, I think that farmers have been supported quite heavily in this country for a very long time. As a consumer, I go to a supermarket, I buy meat. I can make my own decision about whether it's from Australia, whether it's from the United States, or whether it's from the UK. And I think a lot of consumers will be doing that. As far as regulation is concerned, straight over to the WTO, that's what it's there for. It needs to be looking at the balance of how trade deals actually work and whether they're fair or not, all the rest of it. As far as trade with Australia is concerned, well, there are the farmers. Yes, there are. Does Australia have a better deal because its farmers are bigger? Yes, they certainly do. Do they have more cattle? Yes, they do. So it's kind of tilted towards them. But there are other things which Australia needs to think about as well, because it's not having a very good time with its trade with China. Will it therefore face pressure to join, to be a big member of the TTP, which I hope it will be, the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, which we are members of, South Korea will be members of, Vietnam will be members of too. Once those kind of things are brought to the table, then I think you see proper discussions. So I feel that there's been a vociferous objection from the UK's farmers, but it's not the whole picture.
Thank you, Mr.
Well, I think it's interesting that Australia has recorded in the first quarter of 2021 1.8% GDP growth. A major advance after the recession that it had after 30 years last year. Maybe there are lessons that other jurisdictions can learn from Australia. But I wanted you to comment briefly, if you can, on the future of work. Zoom has doubled its sales, despite the fact that we're recording some success, some progress with COVID-19. And in fact, Zoom has introduced another product, Zoom Events. And Zoom is saying that remote working is the future of work. But I know you always talk about hybrid working, the traditional mode. Are we stuck with either this remote working model, or there will be a time when the future of work will be as we knew it?
I think that the hybrid thing, I mean, again, never mind what I think. Let's see what companies are actually doing right now. If you look at the majority of them, very few are saying everybody back to work on June the 21st or whenever the pandemic is deemed to have finished, and, talking about data rather than dates and all the rest of it. Nobody, as far as I can see, is saying everybody's got to come back to the office. So Zoom will continue. Against that, and we've talked about this before, my objection to everybody working from home is that people who are beginning their careers don't rub shoulders with people who are in the middle of their careers. And that's what office life is about. That's what manufacturing is about. That's what workplaces are all about, whether it be on the shop floor or in the office. And I think if we miss that, then we're missing something rather fundamental. So I think Zoom will probably have its own particular future. I think for the moment it's too early to call what the sort of remote working is actually going to be, because we haven't seen anything yet. I mean, politicians at the moment are still heading, because we're all babies, we're all fluffballs, really. We're actually wanting risk-free existence. It doesn't exist. If you want risk-free, then you don't drive and you don't cross the road. So we are going to have to accept a certain kind of level of risk about all sorts of things. I mean, will there be another pandemic? I don't know. Will there be another pandemic in this country? I have no idea. We just don't know. We're seeing, I don't know whether you're suffering from it at the moment, we're seeing the Indian variant right now. Is that real or not? I've had 2 doses of the vaccine. There's a huge growth in anti-vaxxers right now, because they're getting a huge amount of political support and also financial support from websites all over the dark part of the web and also the normal part of the web. So in the future of work is very, very difficult to judge right now. So that's why I think that Zoom is probably betting on that uncertainty as we speak.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Tundun, what's next?
For an update on COVID-19 pandemic, we're now being joined by Adeswa Omoran. Good morning, Adeswa.
Good morning, Tundun. Thank you so much. So many uncertainty, just picking it up from where Michael stopped, including the true toll of the pandemic. You will recall that there have been several reports and several concerns expressed by scientists globally, including those from the WHO, who have said that the current pandemic may be an undercount. And we're beginning to see countries adjust and review their infection as well as death rates. And after such an adjustment of official death toll, Peru has now become the nation with the worst coronavirus mortality per capita. Mexico, also in Latin America, has also, in the last 24 hours, reviewed its figures, raising the country's confirmed COVID-19 death toll by 4,272. Although deaths worldwide have decreased, infections remain high globally as vaccine distribution also remain uneven. But those are the official statistics according to the Johns Hopkins University there on your screen. Japan will today host a summit to help raise funds for the WHO COVAX facility so that poorer countries can also vaccinate against the virus. Here in Nigeria, 17 new infections were recorded in 5 states. No deaths were reported in the last 24 hours in the country. And in the last 24 hours, I can also tell you now that 25 states have commenced the second dose exercise against the virus. That's vaccination against the virus in the country. According to the latest data by the NPHCDA, which is the primary agency for the vaccine rollouts in the country. And so far, Nigeria has recorded 10,027 cases of mild adverse events following immunization from the COVID-19, as well as 86 cases of moderate to severe incidents were also reported. And that's according to the agency's boss. These reactions, he says, range from pain and swelling at the site of vaccination to more serious symptoms such as headaches, abdominal pain, fever, dizziness, allergic reactions. But he says everyone has recovered. Dr. Faiza Shuaib was the person I'm talking about, who is the boss of the NPHCDA. He was speaking at a weekly press conference on COVID-19 vaccination, and he also revealed that 5 states have the highest records of these adverse events after immunization. On the next consignment of COVAX shipments for vaccine into the country, we keep talking about what Nigeria is doing and when we will get it. Well, he says the dates are being finalized. However, bilateral conversations are ongoing for the country to access more doses of vaccines from developed countries who have stockpiled them. He also hinted on efforts to fast-track establishment of local vaccines. And from the briefing, we're also told that Gavi has donated $8 million worth of personal protective equipment to Nigeria. And finally, he warned Nigerians against becoming complacent, stressing that the Delta variant, otherwise known as the India variant, remains a significant source of threat. Quickly out of Nigeria, a second Chinese-produced vaccine has got the endorsement of the WHO. It's branded CoronaVac in some countries. Well, it got the World Health Body's listing for emergency use, even though it says some evidence and data gaps are still lacking. This listing means that it can now be added into the COVAX facility, and of course the storage is very conducive for poor countries. It can be stored in standard refrigerator. It's a 2-dose vaccine with 2 to 4 weeks interval between shots. And then Britain, finally, guys, no daily deaths have been recorded in the UK for the first time since July 30th, 2020. Health Secretary Matt Hancock says this is good news. However, they are far from being over with the pandemic.
And yet the UK is going ahead full steam to reopen fully on June 21st. What are your thoughts on that? Because some scientists have come out to try and sound a note of caution about that. And you would have seen Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland is towing a more cautious approach.
I agree with them. Cautious optimism is the word for the UK at the moment. They are vaccinating very fast. They're one of the fastest in the world. I think they've got this under control. And the snag they may be facing is the Indian variant, which is the Delta variant, which is the dominating variant in the country. And we know it's highly transmissible. So they have to be cautious in that opening.
Well, quickly, I think... the concern in the UK, as has been pointed out, is that date, magical date of 21st June for the easing of restrictions. Yeah. And both the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, they are both optimistic that they will be able to do so. However, no final decision has been taken. The Prime Minister says they're studying the data, they're looking at the situation, but of course there's a lot of excitement in the UK that people can now at least gain some freedom. But I think we should wait till that decision is taken. But the point raised by the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, it should also be noted. The spread of the Delta variant, as you called it, is in the north of the border. And that, is going out very fast. And that's the main concern. However, the United Kingdom under Boris Johnson, after the initial crisis, the hesitancy, official hesitancy, as reported by Dominic Cummings, has been able to immunize at least about 75% of the adult population. And that's a lot of improvement, considering the fact that the United Kingdom was one of those major countries in Europe, that didn't wake up early enough. Then, you talked about Sinovac vaccine that has now been given emergency use authorization by the WHO. That's the second vaccine from China that will be given that authorization. Last month, it was Sinopharm. But the thing about this Sinovac vaccine is that it can only be administered upon persons from the age of 12 upwards.
18 upwards.
Is it 18? 18
yes,
upwards.
18 upwards.
But the clinical trial did not include people above the age of 60.
Yes.
Although WHO is saying that, well, that doesn't matter. From the reports that they have seen, this is something that is safe enough. And that the Sinovac and the Sinopharm will likely become part of the COVID facility. The COVAX facility, which will be distributed. And Gavi, the Gavi Alliance, is already talking to Sinopharm, which got its own approval last month. Yeah. Well, any little news, any small news about another vaccine receiving authorization is good news. Indeed. Because it means that will increase the amount of vaccines that are available. You recall that when the Serum Institute of India began to have problems in terms of local supply, that affected the effectiveness of the COVAX scheme. And now you have from China 2 vaccines that have been authorized. That should help a lot. Yes. That should help a lot indeed. And in any case, China is committed to what they call vaccine diplomacy, or the friendship vaccine program. And in about 50 countries, China has donated about 3.8 or is it 4.9 million doses of vaccines. Yes. Africa, however, again in that regard, is holding the short end of the stick. But the excuse is that Africa does not have the capacity. But we need to improve in Africa so that we can be part of this global drive to ensure that as many people as possible get the vaccine.